In this video, I'm going to attempt to describe the anatomy of a term, namely substance of existence. What means substance of existence? Before we get into the definition of this expression, because definition, of course, is merely one aspect of the schema of a term, because we consider what? Number, gender, question kind, and so on. I want to look at these other aspects. So typically, a substance of existence, or an example, such as God or nature, just to jump into it, it is singular. So typically the number or the numerical type, typically singular, which we also call a monad. Monad from monotheism, Greek prefix, rather than plural or hybrid. But a concept like universe or world, typically used singularly, nonetheless could be invoked plurally or dually. Christianity, for example, could juxtapose this world and the other world, the here and the thereafter, this life and the afterlife, also to juxtapose what is versus what should be, not to forget a third option in that conflict and in that strife. There you have it. So number refers to, speaking about the concept, whether it could be plural, strictly singular, dual, plural, and so on. And more generally, it's the data structure of the concept. For example, tissue. This is these are Stop and Shop tissues, if you can see that. Tissues are made by various manufacturers, such as Kleenex, and to my knowledge, Kleenex is so important that a Kleenex is a tissue. So, yeah, a brand, which is a named example, which you wouldn't consider to have the root of the concept or the name of the concept, nonetheless also has the root or sits on the throne, so to speak. Why do we care? Because that's what we're talking about when we say the numbers, really the configuration of the concept, how its members, submembers relate to each other, which are less important, which are more important, and so on. Say the monotheistic God existed alongside the Greek gods, a monotheistic tradition alongside polytheism, to say nothing of the saints. Then what? If you just say God, you don't ask which one. So that's the root member. It's the one you know. Or if a doctor says science, and you say which one, he can't tell you physics. He'll probably just say medicine or community or whatever. But hopefully it's clear. If you ask which, then you disrespect his singular concept by treating it as plural. And also you prize your ignorance above his knowledge and conscience, his attempt to speak directly to your conscience and co-opt it against yourself and your better judgment. And gender. In this case, speaking English, I don't think we'd really care about the gender of substance of existence, whether it's masculine or feminine. But taking this aside, we could say, oh, well, the gender of God, a former substance of existence, was, of course, masculine. The father, not only masculine, but paternal. Great. And nature, oh, well, that's die Natur in German. And yeah, natura in Latin, if I remember that right. That's feminine. And, fields and open spaces to be taken, territory, terra, to be exploited. Oh, of course, that's feminine. But we wouldn't want to get into a dispute with sexual ideologists now, would we? So let's leave the aspect of the schema, the gender of the term aside, but keep it in mind, even as an English speaker, so you can remember the other aspects and maybe joke around about changing the gender of a noun or a concept, but only to reflect a big historical transition. Probably what we really want to change would be the question kind or the number of a concept to affect the manufacture of new eons or new who's. who's like become a new person, independent of previous weaknesses. Relevance is something related to search engines, but also related to value, importance, economic. It could be reflected by the frequency of a term in a text. In the case of substance of existence, a category comprising former substances of existence like God, nature, and whatever third we might consider. What do we have to say? That substance of existence isn't just a term that occurred in my notebook. I'm not going to say that it's relevant for search in the English language over a collection of documents, at least with respect to frequency. But if we know that, hey, this is our attempt to generalize previous anchors of culture and philosophy, then yeah, it is relevant in that it comprises former main or default concepts. Cool. But back to the definition. Okay. How would you define substance of existence based on what I just said? An individual that exists, on which all other things that exist depend. That is to say, this thing, whatever it is, it exists. Why does it exist? Well, just because. It's axiomatic. It's given. For example, space or universe. The universe, so big. And it's given. It contains all stars, galaxies, and so on. And you know that something exists if it's out there in the universe. Notice the contradiction of prepositions. Anyway, the spatial example of a substance of existence also means to say antithetically that what's purely in your head, the ideas that don't map to or aren't bound to definite objects, whether visible or measurable, those are nothing at all, mere phantasms, ghosts. So a spatial substance of existence isn't just singular, it's also antithetical, not only to what you think, but also to what you intend, what you might create and bring forth. That's an aside. Let's look at some examples. In the case of God, it exists because it was created by God, either directly as an individual or as a species or form. That's following the tradition of Genesis. This explains how God might be a substance of existence. The thing exists not because it's out there in space, but because it exists as a species or a form straight from the mind of God or through an intermediary. The artist just thought of the form of this mason jar because he had been given direct inspiration from God in a single moment. The form of the mason jar did not evolve from false starts or failures or other forms. It's not something repurposed in order to hold food, jam, or water. No. I mock, but that is how you could think theologically or perhaps in an Aristotelian way. So why do we care about this term I'm attempting to coin that might be useful to synthesize some notes of mine? Why? As I've said, this term, substance of existence, is more general than God and nature, beyond God and nature, God or natures. Whose antithesis is that? I remember a thing or two from Spinoza and Schopenhauer, who quotes Spinoza, of course. God or nature. How is that? Deus sive natura in the Latin. Okay, when still why do we care that it's more general? Moving on, it's also more general than will to power and being. You could argue that will to power is Nietzsche's first idea, it's his chief term. Would Nietzsche really say that anything that exists, though, like a thing, if things being as actors or acted upon are conditions of all actions whatsoever, would he say that there is such a thing that all others that exist have to depend on? No, because that's an overly ontological statement, all about the conditions of things happening at all, rather than just pure happening. It's overly conditional. It's excessive preparation or calculation, wondering how anything might happen at all, rather than accepting that the default state of things are just pure happening, pure change, and so on. Martin Heidegger's chief concept, probably being, maybe time. I'm going to claim that this category of terms, this meta term, substance of existence, also comprises every philosopher's prime fetish, but Marx's Capital, for example, could also fit into this. And note that capital is probably something that's a quantum. How much? How much do you have to invest, to spend? Or how do you get more? How do you increase the capital that you have? It's interrogative categories, not who, like God. If the gods fall into who, which, what kind. Space, probably a degenerate example of concept where. How is it degenerate? Because it doesn't give information about where something has happened or where something is. It's the kind of mono concept that obviates the question. And yet what does it do? It could be that your thought process is such that your first premise is not a sentence in words, but an astronomical imagination that as you start to think rationally, you always picture the Earth as a planet or something as out there beside your head in space. It's a kind of space first imagining, and words are merely contained in that space, and all actions happen according to the operant policy for motions. Any questions on why substance of existence is important? I have one. Is it important? By asking why is it important, we've implied that whether it's important has any value at all has already been answered affirmatively.